Thank you for inviting me, Elizabeth, to this Gender Summit once again. And thank you to the Gender Summit team for this invitation. I've been presenting our work in Sweden many times at the Gender Summit. I think it was the first time on Gender Summit 5, back in, you have to correct me, was it in Vienna or in? Probably in Brussels. And time flies, you could say, and things are happening in Sweden as well as in other countries. It's really nice to be here again to present our work in Sweden on gender mainstreaming academia. And I've tried to do a presentation. Usually I'm quite critical, so I will be quite critical even today and ask some really tricky questions that I think concerns what happens when statistics are in place. What happens afterwards when we really have disaggregated data, as we have in Sweden since almost late 1970s. When it comes to higher education, we have a lot of data, and how are data used and what happens in gender mainstreaming policy and so forth. Just looking into the Swedish situation, you could say many things. Usually we used the picture of female professors, the number of female professors, and at the moment there are 27% female professors, lower in STEM fields. So you could say Sweden is not that well out compared to other European countries, for example. I'm in a specific expert group under the Minister of Research for Higher Education in Sweden concerning gender equality in academia, and we are discussing how to actually frame this problem. Is the problem 27% female professors, or is the problem 73% male professors? At the moment, we're saying in Sweden that the number of female professors are increasing too slow. The proportion of female professors are increasing by 0.6% per year in Sweden. And that sounds alarming to some and not so alarming to others, because we can always say things are moving forward, right? But if we say that the share of male professors are decreasing by 0.6% per year, everyone says that's so slow, it's too slow, we have to be more and more fast than that. But I think we are into these kind of questions right now in Sweden in higher education, how to actually frame the problem with gender equality. And I would say from really broad but also sketchy version of gender in Sweden, we have talked a lot about women, talked a lot about representation. The number of women has come to be equal to the issue of gender equality. How many are they? So we are somehow stuck in the numbers in Swedish gender equality politics, you could say. And in my organization, we try to frame it in another way. We call it, well, it's not enough to cure the symptoms. We have to cure the disease. The symptoms, well, we can see the symptoms within the figures, but the diseases that we have in higher education in Sweden is quite large, I would say. You can look into the question of men and women choosing to study at universities. We are in Sweden below OECD average when it comes to gender segregated choices for study. And this is something that has been picked up by the current government in Sweden, which is the Social Democratic and Green Party government in Sweden. And they have proclaimed themselves a feminist government. I think it's the first feminist government globally, actually having that kind of frame, right? So when I prepare this presentation, I actually put a question mark on doing it the feminist way. Because looking into 4 years of politics, you could say that there has been some reforms that you could claim being feminist, but there have also been a lot of reforms not being feminist by this government. Anyway, the two major programs in Sweden during the last years has been on gender mainstreaming. And there are two different programs. One of them is called Gender Mainstreaming Governmental Agencies. There are 60 specific governmental agencies in Sweden working with gender mainstreaming on assignment by the government. And they have, for example, you have all the research financing organizations having this assignment for a couple of years. And I've been speaking about this before at the Gender Summit. And then we have Gender Mainstreaming Academia, GMA. It's been going on since 1st of January 2016. It's all the Swedish universities, 33 of them, and they have an assignment to gender mainstream everything they do. So gender mainstreaming teaching and research in many, many ways. And in order to make this work, we, in my organization, the Swedish Secretariat for Gender Research, that is placed at the University of Gothenburg, has got the assignment to be a support structure for gender mainstreaming. And we have done quite interesting work, I think. I will tell you a little bit about it. It's been going on for 2 years, and since the 1st of January 2018, this work doing the support structure has been taken over by a new government agency in Sweden, a gender equality agency. And I think that is also quite unique, looking globally, that we have a specific agency today in Sweden for gender equality. So today I will tell you something about the first 2 years of giving support to the universities when it comes to gender mainstreaming in Sweden. And what we did in Sweden was we tried to frame the issue of gender mainstreaming, because there are quite a lot of critique on gender mainstreaming within international research. For example, there is a tendency when you frame your work within the framework of gender mainstreaming that you focus what is doable. You try to change the things that you can see, for example, through statistics, but maybe gender mainstreaming should do something else, should target the necessary and really important issues within academia that needs to change. So what we did was we used a specific approach in our support structure from Carol Lee Backey, the feminist policy researcher from Australia, and her problem-based idea. That is, we asked not how to achieve gender equality, instead we asked what are the gender inequalities that we need to solve within higher education in Sweden. For example, the career structure in Swedish academia is actually producing something really problematic, in the sense that you have almost, I think more than half of the researchers in Sweden are employed on insecure employment contracts, right? And this is clearly to the negative part for female researchers, and we have statistics on it, we have a lot of knowledge on it, but still we don't attack the problem, we don't try to solve that problem. Instead we say, well, they will eventually climb the ladder, eventually they will, but they don't. We have really nice statistics showing that it takes more than 12 years is separating men from women, climbing the academic ladder up to professorship. We have had that kind of statistics since the 1990s, but still we don't address the problem in that way. So we try to use a problem-based intervention targeting these specific problems. And one of them are, of course, the resources, the money in academia. And we use Nancy Fraser's the political scientist, feminist political scientist, looking into the question of redistribution of resources. How can that be achieved in many ways? And we specifically look into research money, the funding of research coming from the research financing organizations, and how it's distributed within academia. I will get back to that too shortly. And then, of course, it's not all about gender in a binary sense. Of course, there are several intersectional challenges within Swedish academia, and this has not been challenged, I would say, within Swedish academia for so long time, just a couple of years. And we can see that the aspects of class and ethnicity and also age has been strongly neglected within the gender equality work within Swedish academia. So this is also an important issue. And then, as I try to say, we are trying to look into how to, not adding on gender mainstreaming to the current organization, but also looking into how to reorganize the current practices within academia. For example, the peer review process. I usually hear at these kind of conferences, I hear the way we talk about peer review is we want it to be not biased, right? No gender bias. We have to get rid of bias. But what happens without bias? How can we ever get rid of gender bias from the peer review system? We have asked with our program. And we have realized that we have to change the way we look at peer review in itself. Not adding on or adding off gender, right? And also try to reorganize the way we talk about and do gender mainstreaming. So within this program, there are 6 areas that the universities in Sweden has been working quite a lot with. As you can see, the peer review process, the career paths and such has been in focus. Specifically, academic leadership has been gender integrated in many, many ways. Resource allocation, that is how research financing, where is the money going within the university, and so forth. in order to make this as short as possible, I can just guide you to our guidelines that you will find on the internet, on our webpage. And we summarize all the kind of issues and strategies that we have used during this program in order to make others interested in the way we work. What is problematic with the kind of work that we have done is that it's not transferable to other contexts. We have realized that we got quite a lot of critique from other countries saying, well, you're talking above our heads. And then we have said, no, we're not. We're trying to just illustrate the way we work. But we get this kind of critique. So I thought that the way I should end up today would be to be critical to our own program, right? So I have some really, really tough issues, upcoming issues within Sweden, but I think they are quite similar in other countries, depending on where we are in our work in gender mainstreaming. So we're doing our work for 2 years, and I find one of the most intriguing questions being, what are we actually doing when we do gender mainstreaming? There are so many gender equality plans within Swedish higher education institutions saying we are doing gender mainstreaming. Actually, many of them have written, our goal is gender mainstreaming. It's not gender equality or targeting gender inequalities, it's achieving gender mainstreaming. But that's not a goal, is it? Nothing will happen with that kind of nice policy. And if you look in Europe or globally, you can see these kind of policies in many, many parts of the world, I think. So this is one of the major issues, I think, the way we frame the issue of gender mainstreaming. The second point concerns the reluctance of the political area to actually decide on important reforms concerning higher education. Instead, they are pushing downwards the responsibility for gender equality to the organizations, to academia. But within higher education system, it's really difficult to change things. So there is a kind of gap between lack of reforms from the political field and the lack of ability within higher education to change. And they tend to blame each other, right? So we stand in between in a way. Also, we can clearly see that a lot of the gender mainstreaming work in Swedish academia is actually kind of male streaming. Have you heard the word male streaming before? We say that we integrate a gender perspective in our processes, but actually what we do, we're trying to integrate women into current processes of academia in Sweden. So we try to turn women into academic men and force them to adopt academic masculinity traits, right? This is also part of the gender mainstreaming problem. If you try to work with the resources, the money, you will quite quickly end up discussing why is important, and then you have to say, well, it's a question about power. Who's got the power of the money? Who can do research? Who can do teaching and so forth? And then you return and stumble upon some resistance. And I would say the major resistance within Swedish higher education institutions when it comes to money is it's not saying it's wrong, because everyone says, I think gender equality is really important. I want to do something about it. I want to allocate the money in a different way. But when nothing happens, that is the major form of resistance. Everybody makes sure that nothing will happen, right? So it's the kind of non-work of gender mainstreaming. We're all happy family of gender mainstreaming people in Sweden, but no one really does anything. Yeah. So we even produce statistics showing the problem with the money. We have so nice reports, but that doesn't force people to change. Because I think it's quite obvious, it counteracts the idea of who is in charge of the money. And that is really a tricky question. Mm-hmm. And finally, I don't know about your countries, but in Sweden, the Me Too movement striked really strong, both in politics, in culture, and all over, you could say. And we made some kind of reflections on the issue within the gender mainstreaming program, but we could clearly see that the higher education institutions, they put this question aside. They said, okay, it's a specific question, let's do a better policy, let's have some seminars, but it's not part of the gender mainstreaming program. This was really interesting. To me, this is really strange, because if you want to tackle sexual violence within academia, you have to use every every version of gender mainstreaming in order to solve it, right? And I've been performing a research review on sexual harassment in academia at the moment. It will be released this autumn, published by the Swedish Research Council. I've been screening all international research on sexual harassment in academia, more than 5,000 publications. And I can say that the research that we have at the moment in Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, is so poor compared to so many other countries. So it's also an issue of sexual violence not being an issue within Swedish academia. So hopefully next time I'm back, I will talk a lot about sexual violence in Sweden instead. Very short, but I hope you got some ideas on gender mainstreaming and statistics. Thank you.